Strong Enough merch is now available. Go to strongenoughpod.com and check out all the stuff that you can get so that you'll have those daily reminders that you are strong enough, you are worth it. Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to talk about a toxic and challenging work environment that led to difficulties in his personal life. He was able to get away, but then he suffered from imposter syndrome. He's going to talk about how he was able to cure that and give tips and tricks on how you can be more productive and happier in your work and personal life. Please help me welcome Rafi Pryntz-Nadworny. Rafi, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. And I am loving your background right now. For the listeners that can't see it, we are in space. How did we get there?
That's a good question. It's one of the default photos that you can choose on Zoom.
Well, I like it.
I think this is somewhere, I don't know, Africa, maybe I'm wrong, or Italy.
I am geographically challenged, so I will just agree with you on that and just say whatever you say about it, you are definitely right. Rafi, I would love it if you would tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a marketing operation manager by day, and I work for a kind of like insurance, payroll, is a PEO company. So we do all the boring stuff that, and allows entrepreneurs or business owners to do more fun things. So I just started that job literally like a month and a half ago, but I've been doing this for over 7 years. And outside of that, I am a shiny object generator. So that's someone who has way too many startup ideas to actually be able to implement. So I have a few on my plate that I'm currently juggling. I also am a juggler, so I could do over like 6 objects at a time. So balls, rings, clubs, Diablos, like I've been doing that for over 15 years. I also do partner acrobatics in my spare time. That's kind of like me in a nutshell.
That got way more interesting than I was anticipating. I have to tell you, I have tried to juggle before and I just can't seem to get it, but maybe I just haven't tried hard enough.
Well, there's try harder or try smarter, right? So I spent 3 weeks of my life because I saw a friend do it. I'm like, I'm gonna learn. So I did not eat, I did not sleep, I didn't talk. I was just like, I'm gonna do it. I kept dropping. I finally got it within 3 weeks. Then we're talking like the bare minimum, like just get 3 balls down, right? And I'm showing my friends. I'm like, hey, this is what I learned. This is so cool. They got it within the hour. So either my talented friends are just throwing out the curd, or it's just easier to learn when you have someone to help you out.
I think that's exactly what it was. You gave them the edge.
I like to think I'm a great teacher.
I would agree with you. Well, we talk a lot about relationships on this podcast. That's kind of the whole purpose. And something that I realized recently is we have not been really talking about one of the biggest relationships that all of us experience, and that is our work relationship or relationship with others at work. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about your work relationship that was kind of tough for you, and we're going to dive into that and talk about where you were and where you are now. So will you tell us a little bit about that tough situation?
Sure. So this was my first like corporate job, and I say corporate, but it was really like a small architect firm, right? So I had done like lots of little jobs right out of college. It was a tough getting like my first gig, and this was handed to me by a friend who had worked there, or was actually working there as an architect. So like, hey, we're looking for kind of like a marketing / administrative position. And at the time, I was like desperate. I got to do it. So the official title was Executive, Administrative, and Marketing Assistant. And I quickly learned the longer the title, the more work you have to do. So I had 3 different bosses. I literally was in the middle of all 3. And I would have these conversations just fly over my head. I'm like, Rafi, tell Mark that he has to attend this meeting on Friday. And then Mark would say, no, I can't. I have pre-existing plans. Tell Ted that I can't make it. Like they're just like like it's like having two divorced parents at a long dinner table. You know, the kind of like comedic skit where the child has to go back and forth. Mommy says, you know, like that. And I was literally in the middle of it. Um, so most of my time at this firm was helping the CEO, the president of the company. And then for a portion of that was actually like helping the senior marketer with their task. And then there was a couple like small bits of things that I helped the VP with. So that was kind of like my role in the company. Um, so just to give you a little bit of context about what was happening in the company, when I joined, there was about 14 people employed at the company. When I was let go, it was down to like 8 or 7. So they weren't doing well financially at all. Um, so that's kind of like the context of the situation. Um, yeah.
How hard was it for you to feel like that kind of person stuck in between three different bosses? I mean, one boss is hard enough, and understanding what they want from you and how you need to deliver work product, that's bad enough. So how is it with three?
So yeah, I'll just rattle off the list. So the first 2 weeks there, I had just made a list of things to do. You know, every time they told me to do something, I had over 200 items on my to-do list within the first 2 weeks, right? And the majority of that was just the president talking to me, not even like the other two bosses. And I'm like, this is I can't even like do this, right? And every time I would start, and it's not as simple of like, here's all the items that we want you to do, right? As clean as day. I've literally had my boss tell me, I don't have time to explain clearly what I want, but I want you to do it a particular way. So you're just going to have to read my mind. And I would get tasks like, hey, could you find the email from that guy from last week? I had to become basically like a master brain mind where I memorized everything and like took amazing notes. My handwriting has never been better than it was at that job. Um, and it was just crazy because I never knew the priorities because they didn't have time to give me priorities. So I would always be trying to assess what they're going to call me out on next. So like, did you get that done? And I had no idea. So kind of akin to how they test um, kind of like people's stress endurance in the army.
Hmm.
Do you know how they do this? It's fascinating
I
actually. Like
don't.
how yeah, so how they could test people's ability to bear stress under like the pressure of the unknown. All they do is they make people run, and they just don't tell them how long they're going to run. And that's all it takes for people, humans, to break down in like a crisis mode, just because they don't know how to like conserve their energy. So I kind of make the akin to what was happening at my job is because I had no idea what task at any given moment would be called out and say, where is this? I need it yesterday.
I have to tell you, I really, I kind of laughed when you said about running and not telling how far. I can relate to that. So, and I am a runner, but I remember this one time I went running with my friend Boo, not her actual name. But she and I were kind of like, we were running and walking and running and walking because we weren't in that great of shape at the time. And so, like, we would pick points, and say, okay, let's run to that mailbox. And so we were doing that. And like, we get to the mailbox one time and she'd be like, well, let's just keep going. And I'm like, boo. Like, I need an end point. I need to know when I get to stop. Like, we can't just keep going. That's not going to work for me. So I can totally relate to what you just said. Tell me, how tough was it for you? How stressful was it to like never know what was expected of you and never know what was the priority and literally be told you need to read minds?
Yeah, so I don't know if you ever like collapsed after a day of working and like your brain just like shuts off and things like that. That was literally every day where my brain would just like shut off. I get home and kind of like when you have a nervous breakdown and you just like your brain like the nervous sweat and things like that. At first, I was like super eager because it was like first corporate job. I wanted to do
Mhm.
well, and so when you tied like the high attentiveness to like the high uncertainty, like I was just a wreck, to be honest. Like I think I did really great for my experience and like the position that I was in because like there would be situations again where So and said, hey, we're doing a groundbreaking for one of the buildings, right? And it just so happens that they wanted one person to go, the VP, not the marketing person. And so I show up to the event, as I should, and the VP of marketing shows up because the principal guy he had a previous event, right? So it was basically staged like this, where the president was like, I want you to go. He's like, I can't go. I have a pre-existing commitment. And then the president like walks off, right? And then so like the two senior managers look at each other like, I can't go. And the other guys are like, fine, I'll go. I'm available. So um, fast forward, the president hears that the manager, the marketing manager, went and not the other guy, and he almost fired me for not preventing the situation from happening. So like I walked into work the next day. He's like, you're lucky I was going to fire you right off the bat. But then I'm like, you're going to fire me for not telling my bosses what to do after they negotiated with each other to do it. So it wasn't even like when I was doing the right thing, I felt, okay, I got it. It's all settled. It was like I had no idea what the reaction was going to be. Like I spent almost 2 to 3 weeks organizing boards because like he had like a lot of like the dream boards or vision boards, things like that. He had a lot of those, but for architecture, so like a lot of like architecture was like, well, what kind of like things do you want to see and things like that. So hundreds of boards, these home boards. So it was like I can't find everything, can't find them. So they assigned me to like sort through all these boards. So I spent like 2 weeks like just dust everywhere, like fixing them out, organize them by industry, by size, all that. I finish it. It's like, well, I can't find anything right now. I don't know where these are. And I'm just like, it's tedious, like monotonous work because you're looking at these boards and there's just pictures on them. You can't like organize them, like it was just crazy. So it was incredibly draining. So I could go on, but I don't know if you want to hear. Yeah,
I mean,
like one. Okay, go.
I don't know. I was just gonna say, it sounds almost like the TV shows and the movies that you watch with the terrible boss that just can't possibly be real, but it was real.
Yeah, one of those unrealistic situations. So I got moved from full time to part time, and that was so. The reason I had 3 titles, the executive minister marketing, is I was coming in to replace 3 different people. So the company had shrunk from 27 down to the 14 when I started, down to like the 7 or 8 when I got let go. So they're not doing well financially. So I think like 4 to 6 months into the job, I got put on part-time, which was fine to me. I'm like, hey, great, I have more time to look for other work. But I was so drained that I was still just collapsing like at the end of it. So it wound up I didn't do any job searching. But a couple months into part-time work, he comes in and he asked me, hey, Rafi, we really need you back at full-time, but we can't afford it. Are you willing to go back to full-time and we just cut your salary in half?
Stop it.
And I was looking at him because I'm like, this sounds like a joke. And he was like dead serious. And I was going to like brush it off, maybe make a casual joke. Like, oh yeah, sure. But like, I was looking at his face. I'm like, I have to like respond seriously to this comment, right? I have to like tell him no. That is like, and like, it was just crazy. And I guess I'll wrap it up with this: is that how I was let go was that I was walking out Friday, and I was like, "See you later," and they're like, "No, you won't." I'm like, "What?" It's like, "Didn't they tell you?" Tell me what? You're fired. They should have told you. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I had like plans to see friends from college. Like I was going out, like just that, the beginning of the weekend, it was a big thing. So like I was rushing out the door. So I'm like, what, like that whole like gear shift, like you coming to a halt. It's like, yeah, hold on. They should have told you. I'm like, wait, where? So it goes in. And so the wife is the HR/accountant. So a really small firm, right? And they start arguing in front of me on whether or not they actually fired me.
Oh my gosh.
And I, at this point, because, everything is like come up, like it's just a bad job. So I'm like, hey, listen, I need to go. I have plans. I was going to have fun this weekend. Call me on Monday if you want me to come in. And I, decided that, like, no, you got to stay. We got to sort this out. like, no, I'm leaving. That's kind of how it was let go. Yeah. So kind of tied that into a bow. But that's really impacted the rest of my career because I've always been terrified of that happening in future jobs that I've had where they're just like, hey, it's Friday, you're gone, right? No notice, no warning, no
Nothing.
indication. Yeah.
Were you scared at any point because this was your first corporate job? Like, were you fearful that this is how corporate America was, that every job was gonna be this way?
I will say that it definitely affected me, right? And it's fortunate that the next job was actually really great and as close to my dream job as possible. I was there for 6 years. Part of it because I loved it so much. Part of it because I was terrified because I knew how bad it got, right?
Mhm.
And I knew from like working at a restaurant and like other like painting, like I knew like it got shady, but not like that terrible. So like when I found something that where the boss was decent, they
Mhm.
respected the hours and things like that. Maybe because of a startup, there was some like crazy things going on, but that was more attributed to like growing pains than bad
Right.
management. But yeah, it hit still to this day. I have in the back of my mind whenever I get like the VP of marketing or like the CEO, like, hey, we need to talk. Like always in the back of my head, like they're gonna fire and it's really hard to quiet that voice. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I can't imagine, always feeling that way. And it also seems like you would be in a position where you're just always uncertain of your work because you never got any good feedback. So was that something that also carried through for you, at least for a while?
yeah. I mean, I think I love feedback, so I'm the kind of person, tell me it sucks, tell me it's great, but like, give me something that I could use to improve. Right?
Mhm.
That's my policy. So, like, I would do musical performances. I used to do musical theater, and people were like, "Oh, that's so great." I'm like, "Yeah, but did you see the second part? I messed up my line there." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, but it was great." I'm like, "But give me something tangible." So you
Mhm.
walk off in a huff because like I wasn't like actually, oh, thank you so much, I appreciate it. I was just terrible at accepting compliments until I got better at it. But like I was always like, how can I improve?
Mhm.
Um, so I think that made me incredibly thirsty to like get feedback. And I've had other bad managers at other jobs where the feedback is like, yeah, he does his work. I'm like, so yeah, I would say that it still impacts me today, where I'm just constantly looking for feedback. Try and part of my job as marketing operations. For those that are not familiar, it's kind of like the IT and marketing, but it's all about figuring out how systems work.
Mhm.
Whether you're manually doing a process or whether it's automated, and how you can have these feedback loops so you know if this process is working, right? So if you try to sell something and it's not selling, e-course, whatever it is, a product, software, it's kind of my job to build in the reporting so that you can get that feedback. So I kind of like took it as a career opportunity to take something that is literally building in the feedback mechanisms.
I love that you kind of made your life's work for now about feedback. What did having those terrible bosses do for you as you move on to supervise people? How has that affected your outlook on your own management style?
Yeah, so I've never had direct reports per se, but because of my startup experience, um, it's very project management, right? So like we would just like, hey, I have a project. They're like, great, you head the team, you assemble your troops, you go for it. So I'm very like hands-on. Let's get it working. Let's get it done. As a very collaborative approach to that. And I've always loved learning about leadership styles, and it definitely lets me know my own limitations. So like I tended to be very micromanageable or like get my hands in because I want it done just right because like
Mhm.
this is how it should be because I've optimized everything and like this is the right way of doing it. Um, and there's lots of ways of getting people to do the right way. Um, and it's more about a matter of what you put into people's black boxes, their heads, right? You,
Mhm.
you, you can put in whatever you want, and then something else will come out, and you just don't know what you need to put in to get the right thing out. And it could be like totally opposite what you expect. So like learning how to change my approach when something's not working rather than to double down
Mhm.
was a big one, right? As well as learning how to give context as you know, just the reason why we're doing things is critically important because oftentimes at the bad company as well as the startup, you were just moving so fast that the context would be gone or lost, and you just had to make it up on your own. And so, giving people context so that they don't have to like rebuild the wheel in their head, rethink all your thoughts just to get to where you are, so that they could do your task, right? Because I had to assume what the CEO wanted at the
Right.
startup, so I could do it because he had no time to tell me. So those are kind of the things I learned as far as like working with other people and managing projects and teams.
You talked about going home at night and being just physically, mentally exhausted from being in that environment. So, did this toxicity manifest itself in any other ways outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, I would not be amiss to say that my mood was like right along the lines of like depression. Like,
Mhm.
you know, I was incredibly stressed. Um, I was hypersensitive. You know, anything that occurred, like it would just tick. Just because like I was always constantly trying to be aware of the smallest movements or to like try to memorize things. So like
Mhm.
I would always be over alert. And it just makes you very, you know, like when you had 7 cups of coffee, you're like super jittery. It's not actually working, right? So like kind of like that crazy adrenaline energy when it goes on too long, where you're just kind of like, you know, shaking and jerking, and you're not actually coherent. Those are other effects that happen. I mean, I will say that I felt completely degraded as far as like my self worth and things like that. Like I can't get another job because I can't even get this one right, you know, and I'm just barely doing, you know, the minimum. Those kind of things. Yeah, so there's a lot of impacts that happen.
Yeah, and it sounds like the impacts even started to turn internal, like you said, that, oh gosh, I can't even do this. What good am I? So, how long did it take for you to heal from that and start to realize you do have worth, you can do the job, you are capable?
Yeah, so I would say there's some certain still parts that I'm healing, or you know, I can still hear the voice in the back of my head. You're gonna get fired, you know, like. But I
Right.
don't think there's any way of turning that off ever. But it's more about um, because I kind of like guided my career to something that was very metric and data driven and like
Mhm.
show results, right? Because I'm building the reports for the companies, right? I'm building the pipelines and the processes where you could kind of see if things are working or not. Um, it's kind of helped me validate my worth. And so when I was leaving my previous company to kind of look for a new job, it left me really in a great state because not only I was getting recruiters that contacted me because like
Mhm.
before I wouldn't hear anything, but thanks to the pandemic, like I was getting a recruiter like once a week, which is unheard of because I usually get one a year basically.
Right.
So like that really boosted my ego quite a bit. And when I was talking with these recruiters, it was also about like the needs. So like the current job had this position open for a year before they found me, right? And so when I was talking with recruiters, I would hear kind of like situations like that. Yeah, we're looking at a few candidates, and like, well, no, it's just you, but they don't want to let you know that.
Right.
So that really helped relieve those stresses, and also knowing that I could prove my value objectively.
Mhm.
That was something that I built up at the last company.
What kept you from leaving that
Yeah.
company?
So you're talking about the bad company, right? Or the
Yes,
yeah.
the bad one, the comical
Yeah,
one.
I really wanted to leave there, but so I had graduated college. It had been a couple of years out. I hadn't found a job that I really wanted, and this was kind of like the first real paying job, you know, not like minimum wage.
Mhm.
So and I had gotten a car, you know, things like that. So like I had some like financial obligations to pay off, even though I was living rent free at the time, and I really wanted to find another job, but I was also like terrified of like maybe it got worse because I always hear horror stories, right? Where it's
Mhm.
even worse than what you have now. Um, so I really wanted to leave, and honestly, it was the complete mental drain that stopped me from searching. So until I would actually let go, I would be able to like, relax, shred off all that stress. I couldn't look for work. Like I would be literally coming home and I would just like collapse, boom, on the floor, and I would just lie there on the tile until I like had enough energy to get up again. Like it was crazy. So that it was just sheer mental drain that kept me at the job because I was too tired to look for anything else.
Which is horrible. Um, did you realize right away that they had done you a favor when they let you go?
Yes. I mean, my first thought was thank goodness because now I could collect unemployment
Mhm.
versus like not. So that was a great benefit. Um, and I don't know if even I like talked to them about that. I'm like, hey, did you fire me or let me go? Like, I just want to make sure like you let me go, right? They're like, yeah, we let you go.
Mm.
Um, so that was kind of like the biggest benefit that I got out of it.
Were you picky? So once you were out of there and realized, how terrible it was, were you pretty picky about your next position because you did not want to end up in a similar situation?
Yeah, so I try to start my own company. So there's a thing called SCORE, I believe. It's a program. So when you're in unemployment, you have two options. One, you could look for a certain number of jobs each month or
Mhm.
week, or you could claim that you're working on your own business and just show progress on that, right? And there's a workbook and things like that. I'm like, I'm going to start my own business. Like, I'm not going back. If this is the corporate world, I'm not going back. So I tried that and I struggled a little bit because the idea that I had was basically build a university. So I should have picked a more tangible business
Mhm.
idea, right? Um, and so once that ran out, I started looking for work again, and I applied to over like 200 jobs. I moved to New York City, spent all my savings. I was down to like $2,000 in my bank account, and I was going to give up on a career in marketing. Right, I was just
Mhm.
done. Right, after 200 applications, I forget how many interviews and like two callbacks, and like I was really close to getting one, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to close the position and just fill it internally. Like we're removing the role." And I'm like, "Come on." And I was like one of the top people in
Mhm.
the last line of interviews. So literally the day before I come home to my home city from New York, I get a call from a friend. They're like, "Hey, we have the startup. Someone's boyfriend is looking for a marketer." And I'm like, you know what? I'll take the interview. Like, I'm giving up on marketing anyway. So like, if it doesn't pan out, whatever. I'm gonna install solar panels on people's roofs. Like, I'll spend my last
Mhm.
2 grand on a certification, and that's gonna be my life now, right? Because I
Mhm.
spent 3 years out of college just looking. So Sunday night, drive back to my city. So a 6 hour drive. Monday morning, I get up. My suit's wrinkled because like I couldn't pack it that well. So like I show up to interview, I do mediocre, right? There's interviews things like, hey, we're looking for someone who's like really strong in copywriting, or our audience is technical writers. I'm like, yeah, I can't write. Do analytics, I could do it, but like I was just kind of like, I had just gotten in from New York the day before, so like I was just kind of mediocre. I'm like, I'm gonna be real honest with you. I'm great with data analytics. Writing, it'll take me 4 times longer than like a normal person, right? And so I leave, I don't think anything about it. And then I get the offer letter out of the blue. I'm like, man. So they gave me until like Thursday, so I had like 2 days to think about it. But I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm going to do it. And so I had that job for 6 years.
Did you ever or do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome?
Yeah, yes, definitely during the startup years, just because so much has changed and so many things that I implemented were no longer getting used. Like
Mhm.
the projects that I thought would be really valuable never got like to the last stage and things like that. So I'd be constantly thinking of like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to show a lot of value, and then nothing would come of it, and I would just feel like I wasted a lot of time. And there was also a lot of, and this is more to the startup than managers, right? Where they're like, hey, we're a startup. We can't guarantee if you're going to get a bonus or not, or a pay raise or not. Like, we just
Mhm.
don't know. And I'm like, okay, I'm not expecting it. And, I'm like 80% of the annual goals or whatever it is. Like, it was only the last year, right when I left, did we hit our goals. So for 6 years, I've
Mm.
been missing my goals, right? And I would get close, like 80,
Mm.
90, 70%. Like I would get real close every time. but like that was really hard for like my self worth because I'm like I can't
Mhm.
even hit the goals that we like set for ourselves, like constantly in the red. Um, but luckily, I had a VP who kind of explained it where like for every startup, the goals are just high. Like no one
Right.
actually hits them unless they're like obscenely good. So every time I would sit down for the annual review, I kind of expect like nothing. Basically, I
Mm.
would go in there and like, oh, I didn't hit my goals, nothing can happen. Or like, hey, here's a 10% raise. Like what? Like, but don't expect that next year, right? We can't guarantee anything. And then I get a 15%
Mm,
raise
mm,
or like 5%. Like I would just get these 10, 15% raises, and like I felt super great because like that's a great raise. Most people are like 3% in corporate,
mhm.
right? I had started with a pretty low salary, so they were kind of like boosting me up to the industry. But um, yeah, it was kind of that dichotomy of like I'm not hitting my goals, but now they're giving me big bonuses and raises. Like it just so after a while, I'm like validation comes from within. Let me just focus on the metrics and knowledge that I know is valuable in the industry.
Mhm.
So that's where I started really focusing on like Salesforce, HubSpot, like the major systems, and the fact that I knew them and I knew that a lot of the administrators that I networked with, and this has helped a lot recover from like the imposter syndrome, just talking to other people in my role, like growing that network and just hearing how valuable they were, right? Like one
Mhm.
person had like 3 different jobs within a year and they would just get better offers every time. And they would just, it wasn't that they're leaving the old company, it's just they had a better opportunity. Um, and so hearing those stories really helped kind of like boost my confidence back to where when I left work, I'm like, I'm pretty confident I could get a job within 3 months. And I think I got it within 2 months of searching.
And now you probably don't have to go home and just lay on the floor for hours at a time in
That's right.
mental
No,
anguish.
yeah. Now that I moved to Hawaii, I get to lay on the beach.
Wait, you're in Hawaii?
Yeah, I'm doing
Oh,
experiments on happiness and productivity. So I decided to move to
okay.
Hawaii to see if it worked, and it did. I'm able to be 80%, 87% productive last year, and I tripled my happiness. I keep a
That's been
spreadsheet. I'm one of those nerds, in case you can't tell.
No, I love it, and I guess, like, I'm loving the fact that you have found a way to quantify your happiness. I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
You should bottle that up because people are gonna want that. So, tell me, are you gonna leave Hawaii?
not for the time being. I plan to stay here until like one of my business ideas gets off the ground and is super successful, or I have a gap in like employment, and I get to
Mhm.
like travel the world and work abroad or something.
What if your happiness level declines as does your productivity level?
Yeah, I mean everything's experiment. So um, happiness, like this is average happiness, by the way.
Mhm,
That I talked about. So like there's lots of fluctuations, and
mhm.
actually one of the things that I'm working on now. So like at first I was like, I just want to be happy, and like the searching for happiness or trying to obtain happiness, especially when you have those environmental factors like job, relationships, your
Right.
house, your income. When those are bogging you down, it's really hard to focus on just be happy and
Mhm,
satisfied, right? And so part of the reason I moved to Hawaii away from my friends, my families, everyone I knew, is that it's really hard to create your own environments, right?
mhm,
You're basically building your entire surrounding. So that's why I moved here. So it was less about trying to maintain a bare minimum. It's more
mhm.
about how much fluctuation can I manage, right? Because I used to think that, I guess, as a male in America, that emotions are bad. You should be like uptight and like be able to control every situation and not like break down crying. And now that I've gotten a little bit more older and more wise, I hopefully, it's less about that and more about how you could channel the emotions and how much of emotions you could channel at one time safely. So that's kind of like my big goal here. So it's not about maintaining happiness. It's more about when I'm unhappy, can I manage that in a safe way and also like kind of guide myself out of it when I'm ready.
What advice would you give to people who look at happiness, and there are all those external things that are going to contribute to your situation, like your job, your location, your family or significant others. What can they do to manage that a little bit better?
Yeah, so I want to introduce a interesting word because I think there's different kinds of happiness. So we have the hedonism happiness, which is like maximize your pleasurable experiences at all time. And then we have eudaimonia. So you have hedonism on one side, which is like maximizing your pleasurable experiences, and then eudaimonia or eudaimonia, however you pronounce it, is kind of like uh, good spirit. It's where you find like a quiet satisfaction when you're working towards a goal, right? So the um, kind of analogy I use is like in the Western society, we always want to be productive, achieving goals, things like that. And Eastern, they try to be content with being in the present and being okay with their trajectory, right? Where they are in the moment. So when I talk about happiness, I'm often talking about being okay on where you're headed in life rather than feeling like super elated and excited. So like when it comes to like startup ideas and like projects and things like that, I feel happy in the sense that I'm really looking forward to the project that hopefully, it might take years and things like that to come to fruition, right? My ideas come to life. So it's kind of like that quiet satisfaction of knowing that you're working on something good rather than happy. Um, so I got three quick tips in terms of like getting that happiness. The first one is to basically pick up sand with a tweezer, in the sense that you should pick a task that is so small and easy to do that it's impossible for yourself to not do it and procrastinate.
Hmm.
So for me, just for example, I'm like, hey, I want to get stronger. I want to do like 20 push-ups. I'm going to do one push-up more than I did the day before, right?
Hmm.
That was like and it doesn't matter. Like I was in bed, it was nice and cozy, middle of winter. Like it would be 11:59 at night. I'm like, oh, I didn't do my push up for the day. I got to get out of bed. Right? There's no excuse because it was so easy to do. Right? So that's
Hmm.
step one. And step two was kind of um, be aware of when you need to get it done. Right? So give yourself the flexibility. So I had gotten to 200 push-ups a day. And when I started like missing those gaps, because there's just life happens, right? And you
Mm.
start getting those gaps in life, um, it makes it really hard because you suddenly broke that promise to yourself. I'm going to do it every day, and now I didn't do it, and like you can't get back on the wagon. It was really hard, and so it took me 3 years of trying these kind of like cycles where I get the 200 days, and then I would just break to find out I had to build in my vacation time. So where I built it, now I just picked the arbitrary like 80-20 rule, where
Mhm.
80% of the days out of the year, I'm going to work towards my goal, and 20% I have to use on vacation. So last year I was at 87%, so I went over that. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to reconcile that because I realized that joy. So like building in breaks changed my life as far as productivity. Before I was just like, I have to do it every
Mhm.
day. And it's just like when you're exercising, if you try to do everything without breaks, you can only do so much versus giving yourself a rest period. And then the third one, when you're thinking about happiness, it's kind of like being aware. And this is always about like the more you could be aware of what's happening with yourself in the moment that you're doing it, the better you could respond to it. So whenever I was working a task and I felt like I was hitting a brick wall and I was just like not fussed, I would always try to think of what are the other paths? And there's always a great exercise I have in my course, which is called Shortcuts in Life, right? Super interesting exercise.
Mhm.
I'll be really brief because you get a piece of paper, you write whatever your current goal is, right? So my goal was to start up a business, finish one of my ideas, right? So that was my first thing. I circle it, right? And I draw a line off from that, and I draw the reason why I want to hit that goal, right? What was the goal behind it? I'm like, well, I want passive income. I want like $4,000 a month would be great if I had online course sales, and like then I could just like travel the world, and it
Mhm.
would be groovy. And like, well, why do I want that income? I'm like, well, I would like to go to a tropical island. That's where I want to go, right? So I just kept doing that, right?
Mhm.
And then eventually I get to a place that 90% of the people that did this exercise get to, right? And I was looking at this path that I made for myself, and I realized there was no reason to do it in the order that I thought I had to. And so this is kind of like the third technique for finding happiness is that I realized I didn't have to have a startup idea that was super successful, that was earning passive income in order to afford living in Hawaii. And keep in mind, I wanted to live in a tropical island for like a decade, right? This has
Mhm.
been a lifelong dream of mine. That I could do it because I could work remote. I was already working from a friend's basement, that I could just work remote in Hawaii. And there was nothing tangible stopping me from moving. So I love that exercise because it makes it super easy for people to find shortcuts in life where they could just literally draw a
Mhm.
line around the obstacles that they put in themselves or like the goals they want to achieve. They hit and there's always going to be a cost, right? So I'm working full time right now, but I live in Hawaii.
Mhm.
Small tasks, build breaks, find the shortcuts or paths around the barriers you put for yourself.
I love it. Now, you mentioned that that was part of your course. I know that there's a wait list right now, but talk a little bit about what you are teaching people.
Yeah, so I do have a pre-recorded, like everyone could take it, course that kind of goes through productivity, motivation, and procrastination. So it kind of gives you the neuroscience and like techniques behind productivity. So if you want to be productivity, but there's a catch. So you could take it. It costs pretty cheap, but with more knowledge, and this is what I found for every course on productivity and every article I read, it actually prevents you from getting things done. The more you know about a topic, the harder it is to make a choice. This is actually a psychological, I don't know what you want to call it, theory that has been proven. So I always put that as a caveat if you're going to take the pre-recorded version of the course. Like, do it. It's great. Knowledge is great, right? I constantly learn, but that's a form of procrastination and it makes it harder to take action. And so the waitlist is a way of building a virtual environment. So if you can't move to Hawaii,
Mhm.
for those people that procrastinate on their ideas. So it's focused on people that want to be entrepreneurs, the big dreamers who have the ideas on the back burners, but they have a full time job, they have a wife and kids, or a husband and kids, or just kids, and they have like literally only 10 minutes a day to do something with before the brain explodes, and they're trying to get that idea into reality. So that course is all about helping people. So it's all about like operations. How do you get things done in a minimum amount of times, 10 minutes a day, giving you the environment and tools so you're able to work with experts who would do things in a tenth of the time it would take you, right? So like for me to set up a content management system or like your website, like a day, right?
Mhm.
Someone else it might take them a few months. Versus if someone's writing an article, it would take me a few months to write it. So I have dents in my wall where I try to write like my first 100-word essay. Um, so it has like a lot about the environment that you need in order to be productive. So accountability groups. It has a panel of experts that you can be on call. Like, hey, I just have this quick copywriting question or technical issue. So it's kind of like to help people thrive because I found that 1/3 of entrepreneurs, and this is in America, is based on the Global Entrepreneur Monitor survey. So 1/3 of um, budding entrepreneurs are not building their business because of fear of failure, right?
Mhm.
So 60% they see opportunity in the marketplace. About half of them have the skills to take advantage of that opportunity, and yet 1/3 of them are not doing anything because of what's in their head.
You gotta get rid of that.
Yeah,
Tell me a piece of relationship advice that you would give, but let's go with work relationships.
yeah. So one of the most valuable things that I do now in interviews for people that are like I was interviewing the replacement for my role at my old company, just because I'm a super nice guy, and they're like, "Hey, could you interview new candidates?" So I love that at company, right? Um, is the network outside of your job, right? Everyone talks about like, making sure you're on good terms with your manager, your boss, showing, just touching base, being visible. I was just talking with a person who did 20 years in finance and the biggest banks in Australia. And she basically was able to hit that top level management position because she was so visible. But for me, it was always being visible and talking and building a network outside of work with
Mhm.
my colleagues or with people in different positions because that kind of gave me a outside view in. and that really helped me with like understanding my own value, understanding like what skills I had to learn that would help my company,
Mhm.
um, as well as like what I was doing wrong that I could fix pretty easily.
Love it. We are going to take a quick turn here before I let you go. We talked about tattoos earlier before we started recording. You can't see my tattoos today, but I have some. And I know that you don't have tattoos, but here's what I'm going to ask you. So let's say, because I don't know what your barrier to tattoos is. So whatever it is, let's say tomorrow you're getting a tattoo. It's going to be free. It's not going to hurt. You will be able to snap your fingers and make it disappear and reappear whenever you want. So it doesn't have to be with you forever. What would you get and why?
Yeah, so I could actually share my screen, but a it'd be a manta ray that has like multiple animals within it. So I always like the tribal design.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's very tribal. It has like a turtle, a shark. I have like the design pulled up, but I
Love
can't
it.
share it right now. It's fine. Um, and yeah, I've always been fascinated with like the tribal design because like the allowing people to kind of like fill in the gaps of their
Mm-hmm.
imagination with a couple shapes has always helped. Um,
Nice, super
it's just sea
cool.
creatures because I like the tropical island. That's
Yeah.
kind of
Well, and I love that you already have a design plan. So maybe one day. Maybe. Maybe.
yeah. Maybe at least like a temporary one for
There you
starters.
go. Yeah, and I appreciate that. You did say earlier you almost got a temporary tattoo today, so I do
Yeah,
appreciate the commitment to our tattoo talk. Well, Rafi, where can people find you? So if they want to learn more about your course, if they want to procrastinate and take the pre-recorded version, or if they just want to come hang out in Hawaii, where can they find you?
sure. So I'm in Oahu, Hawaii, downtown Waikiki. So that's where to find me in reality. But you could always go to my website, ideastrider.com, because I help people find their strides and bringing their ideas to life. So ideastrider.com. You could also find Ideastrider on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. It's all called Ideastrider. So pretty easy to memorize.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing today your seemingly unreal, comical experience that you had in your first job and how that affected you, but how you took that experience and made it work for you long term to help learn what you wanted and didn't want in a workplace. And thank you so much for sharing the tips to happiness. Those are unreal and I think so meaningful, and hopefully people will get so much out of that. So, thank you for your time.
There you go. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media so you'll never miss what's going on. Remember, until next week, you are strong enough and you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.